growing focus on cybersecurity, an industry that's been born out of all of these discussions, is because we're opening up vulnerability to individuals and cars and data. You know, we're all used to, you know, viruses on computers. We're going to have to start thinking about what that means when it's a car and what the results of that are. So, you know, as Chris said, you know, when you create new opportunities, there's always something that comes along that you have to give some consideration to. I'd be interested to know what the rest of the panel thinks about that.
Yeah, in general, when you design something, you need to design it so that it doesn't just do what it's supposed to do, but you need to design it to make sure that it doesn't do what it's not supposed to do. And as I was thinking about the mesh network, one of the problems that, as Kevin said, we need to solve for connectivity is the issue of if somebody sends me something, whether it's a safety message or software to update in my vehicle or whatever it is, I need to make sure that that's a legitimate message that's being sent to me, and I do what's called authentication on that message. So I authenticate that that's a legitimate thing for me to accept and for me to use. The more different senders that I have, the more difficult that problem becomes. I basically need to have a certificate or something that claims that I can use to prove authenticity, and so we'll have a lot of proliferation of certificates across all these different communication strategies, and some of them will require really completely new techniques for doing that.
I would sure agree with that. Not to be too cynical or skeptical, but you know, it seems like no matter how secure a system is, somebody comes along and hacks it in an embarrassing way. And what we've been describing today is a massive amount of information swapping going on in real time, involving hundreds of millions of vehicles 24/7. I mean, the staggering amount of information you're generating alone is we can get to that in a minute, but how you keep that secure is a mind-boggling challenge, and I would say considerably more difficult than figuring out which kind of broadcasting channel you're going to do.
And it might be a lot easier if you have a fleet that you can control. They could be sharing a lot of information with each other, and you're maintaining that fleet much more regularly than the individual consumers might.
This topic is so relevant that we, and I'm not doing an FEV commercial here, we developed a cyber security tester for exactly that reason. So then we bring in smart people and try to hack into a system. You know, so you can attack the system in many different ways in a lab environment. Yeah, and so that topic is absolutely relevant. Yeah, without cybersecurity, there won't be connectivity.
Yeah, but Bill, what you said is absolutely right. So there will always be someone that will be able to hack into whatever is protected. So, and it was in the past the same. So there were banks that were broken in. So it's possible. The question is more the acceptance level. So right now we are talking about autonomy, and we talk about connectivity, and especially in autonomy. Okay, if one person dies, big problem. Okay, if you reduce 80% of the fatalities, nobody talks about it, but about the people that die, we talk about. And it's the same thing when it comes to the connectivity, which is the general topic. Everybody is right now trained to freely give all their personal information to some sort of a cloud that nobody knows where it is. And now there is then Facebook hacked, there is private information, there's even the German government being hacked. So information is stolen, but people, it's a headline for a day. Perhaps a little bit more when it's the government. It took us 3 days to get over it, but that's a little bit the situation where we are in. And I think right now what we are talking about, it's pretty much because it's not there yet and people aren't used to it. And eventually it will happen. There will be someone hacking into a car and whatever causes an accident or makes whatever, it makes a headline for 4 weeks the first time. And, you know, eventually the hype wears off or the interest wears off because it's someone far, far away. I'm sorry to again be there a little cynical, but it's just about how you train the population.
Just to interject a little hope into this discussion. So the automotive industry is really working hard to solve the cybersecurity problem. There are 2 major initiatives that they're working on. One is standards for how to design systems to be secure from the ground up. So there's an ISO standard under development, ISO 21434. And then there's an overall organization, the Automotive Information Sharing and Analysis Center, where all of the vehicle manufacturers, tier 1 suppliers, telecommunication providers are all part of an organization to share information about vulnerabilities and threats and work together to try to develop strategies to make sure that we will ultimately solve the problem of cybersecurity in connectivity and autonomy.
But you know, I don't want to crush the hope, but
I
the one
apologize,
thing,
100% right with the technology, because yes, you shouldn't make it easy for the guy to break in.
but the one thing I can see in the future is you know, the automotive weekly top 10 list of the most hackable vehicles. Now, if you consider that it costs $1 billion to put a car on the road, that becomes serious.
Yeah.
And so we're not seeing a lot of the automakers right now saying we have safe vehicles. I don't think you will, because they become targets very quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is such a serious issue that, again, regulation standards are going to slow down the deployment, I believe, of some of the things that we're doing.
We should, however, and hopefully we can all agree that the benefits of
Outweigh,
connectivity in terms of safety are unquestioned. Yeah, so
There's more hope.
security definitely needs to be there. Cybersecurity, data security, absolutely. Without that, like I said, connectivity will have no place in the market. But when we talk about what drives connectivity into the market, and you mentioned it in the introduction, Bill, right? Safety, absolutely. Yeah. Mobility efficiency, and then what you described as, let's say, consumer convenience. Those are the trends, and I believe that connectivity will do a lot about improving safety.
I think there's an inevitability about all this, regardless of the issues we've been talking about. And excuse me, just looking at your own phone and the number of apps you have, we've all gotten very accustomed to the idea of having whatever information we want available to us, whatever service available to us through our phones, and that's connectivity on steroids right there. So, you know, applying this to vehicles, maybe from a consumer standpoint, is not that big a leap. You know, we're kind of used to this sort of stuff anyway on our phones. So,
Yeah, the younger generation in particular.
pardon?
The younger generation in particular is very familiar with it.
I think the challenge is the other way around. It's not that there's not enough acceptance for this type of technology in the vehicle. I think the automakers are just struggling to make the technology as quickly available as it becomes on the phone, because you're basically not questioning any new technology on the phone. You're just like, oh, this is cool, now I can do this, right? And you immediately embrace it. And then you turn around and you wonder, well, if I look at my Google Maps, it behaves a certain way, but then if I go to my navigation on the screen and I try to do this and it doesn't move, and then it jumps, right? And then with Google Maps, it's easy, just like type 2 letters, COB, and it pops up Cobo Hall, right? And I click direction, and on the nav system it's different, and I need to type or dial or whatever, right? And the speech recognition doesn't work well. I mean, there's I think it's more from the other side around, and the challenge is more how to integrate newer technology into the automotive side, you know? And
I think the challenge is doing all that while you're driving.
well, I personally think that that voice recognition, right, is going to be like a key.
That could be a good solution.
And the current solutions that are in the market, I don't think they're very good, right? And that's why you see players like Alexa, yeah, or even Google. They are pushing full speed into the automotive side of things. And we announced last week a collaboration with Amazon to be for the Alexa system, the system integrator. We have a demo on our booth as well. And I think it's a completely different level of voice recognition that you have, right? In the current car, you say, call Chris, right? That's the level of how interact or play this and this. Of course, with Alexa, you can say, Alexa, play Madonna, yeah, if you like Madonna. And, but now it's like, Alexa, what is this red light in my dashboard? And then Alexa says, well, this is your oil change light, and so on. Would you like for me to make you an appointment at a dealership? And then you say, yes, please. And then Alexa says, well, the dealership has appointments available here and there. Would you like to take that? And that's a completely different level of voice recognition than what you currently have, right? And so you can experience this again over there, but I think that is what changes the way how we interact with our vehicle if you can bring this technology in.
Yeah, but Schumert, exactly, you made my point. The question is, who makes the money on that case? It's not Ford. It's the Amazon guys or whoever, you know, and that's exactly the point. So what we are trying to do is now defend this intrusion of that connectivity into the vehicle. The same thing when we talk about the cybersecurity aspect, because a car needs to be just much more secure. So it needs to run 15 years and it needs to be run, I don't know, 120,000 miles minimum. So the requirements are so high, the development cycles are so long, and the speed of the mobile phone providers and the internet companies, it's just faster. And then, yes, the old whatever Mercedes-Benz, you know, 5 years ago hype navigation system, it can't compete with Waze. It can't compete with Google Maps. Yep. So and that's the thing. That's the fight that's going on. So the question is, where do we find, as the automotive industry, also from a supply base, a way to still monetize on some of those applications, those intrusions? And that's going to be the big question to be answered. I have no answer. If I would. You know,
and I would throw out there, instead of fighting it, why not teaming up?
Yeah, embracing it. That's the way to go.
If you can, like, for example, let's say, make data available that third parties don't have yet, yeah, or cannot obtain of your vehicle, and you basically mash it or mix it together with services that they have and technology that they have, yeah, and then you basically have maybe a mixed revenue stream that you split. Much smarter approach than just to, hey, let's try to develop this on our own so we can keep it in our own house, right? Yes. But you're not as good as what's available in the market already in other industries.
And one improvement as well is what Tesla did. So they took just a shorter development cycle and a leap of faith. They risked so much more than every other traditional OEM would ever do. And the question is that a way to go as well? And that comes back to the question of acceptance in the in the society. But
there is a lot of cooperation in the market globally, yeah, to get this connectivity technology into the market. So it is very clear this is there's a high level of complexity, and stakeholders from various industries need to come together to agree on standards. As far as the legislation is concerned, the regulatory boundary conditions are important for everyone. So it won't be doable without partnerships, and we all participate in, say, working groups and consortiums to help push that and identify these obstacles that are in the way. So for people to talk to each other early before they make expensive investment decisions, and have some visibility of what's coming down the road is, of course, absolutely crucial. And it is happening.
It seems to me like a big driver here is money. You know, you can see the potential gazillions of dollars floating around out there for the outfit that comes up with the best service or the coolest app or the most convenient thing to plug into your car for you, and that's an enormous driver that I personally suspect is going to overcome various obstacles of security and regulations and everything else, because the interest out there in providers of these services is so huge that it seems like this is just going to come to fruition sooner rather than later, one way or another. And if there are regulations, that's great, but if they're not, in a way we don't care. We're going to be demanding these things and wanting to see them in our vehicles, and being able to update them regularly, wirelessly, no visits to the dealership, etc.
One of the obstacles that the automotive industry is trying to solve at the same time as the consumer industry, and it's related to cybersecurity, is really privacy. So in Europe, we have now the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, very strong requirements around what needs to be, whether if you keep any private data, you need to explain why you need to have it, you need to show how you're protecting it. I think increasingly, globally, people will start worrying about what's happening with the data that they're giving to Alexa or what other devices are in the car. And once again, you know, strategies are being developed. There's methods being developed to solve these problems, and people are giving attention to it. So there's you know, an obstacle to be solved, and there's some hope that it can be solved to some degree.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, I think it's different though than on the security side. I agree fully with you when you laid out the security initiatives and approach. Everybody's striving to maximize how secure the systems are. I think with the privacy of data, there are certain laws and regulations that you need to obey. But I think after that, once you've covered that, then it becomes a strategy that I think every OEM can pick. Yeah? Similar like an Apple collects data from us, but I think only certain data. A Google wants to know everything, right? And this is like a corporate decision that they have made of like what is their data collection strategy, and therefore how much privacy will they allow. They probably both, I hope so at least, yeah, obey to all the laws and regulations that are out there, but everything above that, I think it's their own choice. And so automakers, whether they are in partnerships with third parties or not, probably have the leverage to develop their own privacy data strategy, and then once they have formulated that, will execute on it.
I also wonder if consumers aren't kind of giving up on a lot of this excuse me, issue. All of us who have phones, I think, you know, I don't particularly want somebody tracking me all the time, but I've kind of given up on the idea that I can successfully turn off that feature in every app in my phone and not still have something in there that knows where I am anyway. And in some ways, it seems to me that, you know, smartphones are kind of running interference on all this and prepping all of us to just give it up. You know, you're going to, if you want these features, that's a price you pay. You know, you're going to have to relinquish some information about yourself, your whereabouts, or your shopping interests, or whatever, to get these things, and it becomes that choice. I mean, you hear a lot of discussion about this. What I don't hear so much is, okay, I would like to opt out of all that. I don't see how you can do that at this point. But I mean, has the horse departed the barn here? Maybe it's a little too late to rein this back in.
Who has read the terms and conditions of their latest software update? You did. You did it. Awesome. I think that's right. I mean, you just click on it, and we've gotten used to it, to like, this is just what we got to do. And the alternative is, of course, you can opt out, but then you don't have the service. There's no, I want to opt out, but still have the service. I don't think that option exists so often. Right?
Yeah, I think people have tended to view the smartphone in a different light than the car. And they give the smartphone producers more latitude to capture data. And yet when it comes to the car, people are much more concerned about that data being tracked. And yet those same people are giving up that data on the phone. There's a bit of a discontinuity there.
Can we talk for a bit about this data? I mean, when you think about the sheer volume of information that's going to get generated by the kind of connectivity we've been talking about, just, I don't know what the term would be, way beyond terabytes, but just
petabytes,
mountains and mountains of information being generated by the second. And somebody has to make sense out of that. I mean, there's probably something useful in all that information somewhere, but there's a lot of distraction and noise as well. So is there kind of another group of people involved with connectivity who are saying, you guys figure out how to do the connecting, we're over here figuring out what you do with the result of that, namely how do you produce useful products out of it?
I think that's why we're seeing the rise of artificial intelligence. I mean, the only way that we can possibly interpret the mountains of data that we're gathering right now is through software that can bring that down to a something that we can digest. So I think there's going to be more and more advances with AI, more uses for it. Again, as far as giving up your own personal data, I don't think we've solved that yet, and I think that that's going to be in the news and a big topic for the next few years, because we've seen all of the aggravation with Facebook, Google, that's something that needs to be resolved. I think there are huge privacy issues. Now you go to China, it's a completely different set of rules. They don't have privacy, and they're quite happy with it.
Yeah, and this is not cybersecurity. This is more.
What are you doing?
Yeah, who has this information, or what are they up to?
Yeah.
Your insurance bill, didn't you say that was your business model?
Yeah.
That the insurance would know how you drive the vehicle, and then you get better rates.
You can see that coming.
Right? So
Or worse rates.
or worse rates.
Yeah.
Who is familiar here with Carfax? Right?
Yeah.
Carfax report. So would it be worth to use some subscription, from a back-end service provider, if you could make the data of your vehicle available, so the next person, if you want to sell your vehicle to the next person, knows how the vehicle has been driven?
Awesome, no?
Maybe.
So I guess what I'm saying is, back to the point, what do you do with the data? Of course, it remains to be seen, once every vehicle is in a way a beacon, how the industry deals with data congestion, what would be the issues there. The point, of course, with data, connectivity is just the enabler. Right? You need connectivity to get data, and then it's all about what do you do with the data, very clearly. And that's why a lot of the work that we do with our customers goes into actually the definition of a use case. Right? How do you now use that data in a meaningful way? Yeah. So definitely the point that you're making is very valid.
I certainly get the impression, though, that like apps for smartphones, we have no idea how many things are going to come out of this. I mean, as more and more vehicles are connected, and we are connecting our own base of information with that, possibilities that we haven't even thought of are going to be falling out of this at a pretty fast clip, I would think.
Well, you take a look at the airlines right now. I went through Atlanta recently. I didn't have to show a boarding pass. They have facial recognition, and they knew it was me. I don't remember giving them a photograph. I mean, it's fantastic. That worked really well, but I'm not quite sure I want them having my picture on their system.
You don't have a
Too
biometric
late.
passport?
It's too late. Well, can this panel talk a little bit about the timeline you see for all of this? I've seen, we've talked about a long list of pros, cons, drivers, impediments, and so on. To me, the overarching thing is that there's so much money involved here, potential profit, and useful benefits, that those things are going to overcome virtually everything else. The question is, when are we going to see this stuff? I mean, as I said in the beginning, some of these things are out there already. Are we just going to see kind of a continuum that goes on more or less forever of increasing levels of features and benefits coming out of this connectivity thing, or what?
Will it continue forever? So in terms of adoption, yes, of course, that's going to be gradual. I would believe that a lot, if we talk about the US, a lot depends on the mandate for DSRC as the platform technology. Yeah, that is a decision, of course, that will make that will change the market and enable adoption. So a little bit difficult to say when the government will make a decision. This is all about this 5.9 megahertz frequency band where these technologies all operate. So it depends on, in the US, what the government mandates, my opinion. 5G, my opinion, also will come, whether it's going to be 2 years, 3 years. Of course, the automakers and everybody who needs that technology is pushing. aggressive 2 to 3 years for my personal guess for 5G. And the reason is all you need is a 5G modem in the car, whereas for DSRC you need a lot of roadside infrastructure. So there's a lot of investment that needs to be made. And then to Jörg's point, who turns that into a viable business case? Yeah.
Chris, what is your sense of the ability to build cars in the future that can be upgraded kind of for the life of the vehicle? And you can see that the pace of new features coming along is already way much faster than the ability of car makers to change the whole car. So you want to build it in a way that's a little bit like a smartphone.
Skateboard. Well, the skateboard
Skateboards,
concept is kind of along that idea. Basically, if you look at what Volkswagen is doing with their new MEB platform, the battery pack is like, they call it a chocolate bar. So it basically can be upgraded over time, potentially.
A battery with wheels on it.
Yeah, and you could put many different types of bodies on top of the same platform. So that has the potential to have quite a long, robust life, especially if it's developed up front to be future-proofed with all of the autonomy and robotaxi possible future trends in place as well. So I think certainly software upgradability is going to happen more and more, especially if you design a vehicle from the ground up around an electric architecture with a centralized compute platform. But I think at some point, even that centralized compute platform may need to be upgraded as well when it becomes limited in terms of its cybersecurity potential and so forth.
Anybody else?
Coming back to your question about like the timeline, I believe it's going to be continuously going forever, or for a long time at least. I think right now what you see is on the recording of data. I think there's a lot of focus put on the automotive side into that, like for it's not just measuring the temperature, but you measure whatever you can measure in the car, and then also give it eyes, ears with cameras, radar, lidar, all those things. So that will continue, and you generate the data. About the usage of the data, the communication, I think that depends a little bit on how you can, interconnect with the cars. That will continue to evolve, and that will be a subject. Okay, where it's going to be. And then what Shomad said before, I think everybody is looking into those collaborations, so where you find the right partner to create a business, because also in Alexa, if they can access a certain car manufacturer as a standard, they might become even bigger than one car manufacturer standard. So it's a win-win for both companies. And I think that's started already years ago, and it's continuing to go. The only thing I think the industry has to adopt a little bit with the speed, and that's also when we talk over-the-air update. 15 years of a car, like you said before, it's not going to be the same car at the end when it's over. Yeah, so and that is coming also right now. So it's this speed, and then also who can you partner up with? And the auto industry is changing, is adapting to it. It's not all done in Detroit anymore, and it's here, and I'm gonna see that too. I see that continuing and even intensifying in the near term.
Well, that's interesting, because you think about your phone or a laptop, which is very easy to upgrade. You can put in new operating systems and so on, but that's over a period of maybe 3 years. I mean, if your phone is 3 years old, it's ancient. Yeah. And a laptop, maybe 5 years, but 15. It sounds like maybe it's not realistic to assume that the car, not a skate thing where you can drop another vehicle on your chassis, but just building a car that's going to last for 15 years and expecting to keep up with this, it may not be realistic. So what do we, is this a new form of obsolescence?
Well, the auto industry, and this show is a good example. Traditionally, we would have reveals of something that's going to happen in a year. We may be releasing this new V8 engine in 2 years from now, and that has been the tradition in the auto industry for so long. And now with mobility, we've got this intersection of the IT industry, the computer industry, and the auto industry. And the tradition in the computer industry was to sell something that wasn't even released for 2 years. I mean, you buy a computer and it was definitely going to do this sometime, and you might get an update that would allow you to do it. I think the question of what's the pace of adoption or the use of connectivity, I think we've got to get used to the marketing side of it being about 2 to 3 years ahead of what we're going to get, and it's going to be a continual pace. So if you're reading the magazines, if you go to the shows, you're going to see this is what you can do with your GPS, this is what you can do with your connectivity, this is what you can do in vehicle, and then you might as well sit back and wait for a couple of years, because it will take that long to develop a robust system that can be deployed in the auto industry.
I think there's another element that comes on top of that. We're talking about readiness of technology. For example, right now, there is no 5G chipset that is automotive grade, right? That's probably 2-3 years out. But just because it's available then doesn't mean that the cost of deploying it makes sense, right? So for it to get widely deployed, the cost needs to come down. So having already 4G investments being made and so much capability on a 4G network, I think we'll see 4G sticking around for quite a while, maybe a decade. I don't know. Yeah, don't nail me on the number of years, but it's not that it's going to be over in a year or two, right? So because even if that new technology is available, I think the industry first needs to find a way to monetize connectivity services, make money, in order to then spend the money on the next generation. And with every new technology that comes out, the cost initially is very high, like for new televisions, and then eventually over a certain period of time, it comes gradually or exponentially down. And that will happen with 5G as well. So it's not the availability point that drives the technology introduction, but it's also the cost point, right?
And emerging to, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Sorry. In addition to the private ownership model where the vehicle could last for 15 years in private hands, you have to also think about the rising fleet, shared fleets, and they may only have a lifespan of a handful of years because they're being driven so many miles. So there could be a very natural replacement cycle with the hardware that when the battery is exhausted.
I agree. Let's, if anybody in the audience has some questions for this panel, I would be very happy to entertain them at this point. Anybody? Yes.
So I've heard a lot of discussion around cybersecurity, and I look at cybersecurity as a war on drugs.
The what?
War on drugs. Ultimately futile, but you don't want to make it easy. The barrier for entry for hacking is so low, and the cost to prevent it is so high. Should more resources be put towards recognition of a hack and what we do with that vehicle when we see that? Because if you make the vehicle completely unhackable, you go Die Hard 2 and you hack the sensors, right? So unless you're going to make everything bulletproof, which is by definition impossible, shouldn't there be more resource that says, look, we're going to recognize that there's a hack in this vehicle and we're going to shut it down safely by doing this or stop the transmission? I've never heard anyone talk about that.
Yeah.
I want to paraphrase this just to get this on the record since we're taping this. So the question is cybersecurity. Defending a car is very expensive. Hacking it is very cheap. What's the strategy to deal with that?
So, first of all, I'd like to say that we are worried about the sensors. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, cybersecurity is always a layered approach, right? That we call it defense in depth. And so there will always be an element of defending and making things difficult, and then another element of checking to see if you've identified that you have in fact been hacked. Typically, hackers will always still go after the easiest thing, the easiest thing to get. And so the devices that get hacked change over time. As more attention is given to things that have been hacked in the past, then they'll move on to something else. And I think that the general strategy is to do exactly what you're saying, which is to identify and fix problems as well as defend against problems. And the hope is that overall we'll find economical ways to make the problem difficult enough that people will move on to hack something different.
The other point about cybersecurity that it never stops, and really what you're trying to do is stay ahead. And I think your point about the cost of that being prohibitive, I think it's going to become a bigger and bigger part of the entire vehicle development cost. And so if someone's at a Die Hard 2 level, we've got to be at Die Hard 3.
So I'm not advocating for stopping any cybersecurity initiatives and making it more difficult to actually penetrate a vehicle, but yes, the threat vectors, as we call them, are changing. And I think that the truth is you can't make this 100% proof. As much as software is not perfect, right? You will always have a bug in the software, even though the normal thinking might be, well, you just need to engineer it well enough and eventually it's all good, right? But it's not the case. I think the more critical question is, how do you react when something happens, right? And what plan do you have in place for the different levels of severity of an incident, yeah, that you can, at the end of the day, not exclude from happening. And I think that's more important to understand, in addition to making sure it's as difficult as possible, yeah, within the commercial means that you can obtain. But what do you do when things happen, and how well is your organization prepared, yeah, to do this? I mean, when we hear vulnerability on Microsoft, right? We'll get a software update and it's a patch, and then we need to install it and reboot the computer, and it's probably going to come when it's very severe the next day within 24 hours, right? All these malware issues that we had a couple of years ago on Android devices, for example. I mean, there was like quickly a fix out there, and others just take longer and comes in the next update, right? I think that's more the strategy that needs to get discussed on the OEM level, how to deal with it.
Yeah, but there I have to speak again. And the 15 years is also if you drive 80 miles an hour, you know, to the UP, and then something happens. So I think the saving lives aspect in the auto industry makes the effort so intense, and that's why there needs to be structures in place and how to make it safe. So because again, there is the level of expectation to a car, like you said before, is higher than the level of to a computer or to a cell phone. Yeah. So the money, I think, is spent wisely on that, protecting it. Nevertheless, yeah, if something happens, then yeah, I think the question is, can you detect it?
We kind of expect or accept, I should say, that a car is not, you know, guaranteed to survive every crash, and we kind of have some thinking around autonomous vehicles not being 100% perfect and having to live with that. But around cybersecurity, there isn't, as far as I know, quite the same debate, and the problem is made worse because you can hack millions of vehicles all at once instead of just one vehicle being vulnerable. So it's very important.
I would say that if the impression is that the people are not allocating enough resources to this very critical cybersecurity topic, is not the right impression. There's massive activities, and if you listen to we talk to customers all the time about connectivity. There's not one presentation that doesn't also go into cybersecurity and how to protect it. After the Jeep has been hacked, I believe that's what it took, right? To alert the industry of the risks. Yeah. So it's not taken lightly by any means.
Yeah, I'd also like to reiterate again that every company is focusing on cybersecurity, but they're also, the automotive industry is working together on cybersecurity. They're not, it's not a bunch of little islands. They're really trying to work together.
Another question?
Same thing on the top of cybersecurity. I guess the analogy of turning to I guess, internet of vehicles. We really need to work hard on this, but I hear about partnerships in industry and automakers, but is there enough involvement of academia? Shameless plug, I just had my students yesterday demo a replay attack. Don't you think that involving students, crowdsourcing that would be beneficial?
This question is about the ability to, or the merit in tapping students to help with cybersecurity issues and basically making controlled attacks on systems to see how robust they are.
So the state, we sponsor 2 events during the year. One is a cyber auto challenge and one is a cyber truck challenge. The cyber auto challenge is quite interesting because the OEs, a number of the OEs supply vehicles to us, and I think we get about 6 or 7 vehicles. It's during the summer. It's a week-long event. We bring in students from all over the world, and I can give you more information on that if you like. And they spend a week hacking vehicles. We don't publicize it because the car companies don't want people to know the vulnerabilities of their vehicles, but we have a great deal of success in the community in the cyber security side of it, in trying to get students on board, and it's a program in Michigan that we are trying to scale. So there's focus on students, but like everything in the auto industry, we need more activity with academia. We need more students to get involved in these different topics earlier and younger. So yeah, there's always opportunities and there's always a need for growth.
I think there's a lot of individual activities going on. Later this week and next week, we're doing a hackathon with Honda in Ann Arbor at Ann Arbor Spark. And there's other partners involved. So that is another platform, whether it's directly for cybersecurity only, or in this case we also have data sets collected from sensors, from autonomous driving vehicles, in order to basically better the technology and get the students involved and their creative minds. So I think there is a lot of initiatives that are out there. It's not centralized probably, but it's happening because it's would be stupid not to tap into that talent pool.
It's a growing
it's
industry.
growing more and more.
Yeah, so.
Thanks, great.
Any other, there's another question?
Yeah, would like to hear the viewpoint from this panel on adopting blockchain for connectivity.
Oh, here's a question about blockchain and how that applies. First, somebody can try to define what that is, because I can't do that, I'm sorry, but.
That's what's beyond my level of experience. So. Anyone?
Chris, you want to field that one?
No.
Nice, Kevin. Nice.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I'm not an expert in blockchain, but there's been a lot of, I mean, just as in the financial fields, there's a lot of interest in using blockchains to authenticate transactions, but it doesn't seem to be a technology that would be useful in vehicle. But transaction-wise, yeah, definitely people are looking.
I think we see the level of expertise on this panel in terms of blockchain, right, is maybe exactly the reason why it's not yet right there. Yeah, we know, of course, it's like authenticating transactions, and so you can backtrace all the different steps, yeah, in the transaction. It's, I think, great. First applications are in the financial world, so that you can basically secure that you're not talking to someone, or whatever money flow you have, that it takes a wrong turn and your money disappears, right? As maybe one use case, but I think it's still at an early point where how to use this in an automotive environment is become clear, right?
I think blockchains can play a big role in terms of cybersecurity. So if someone is trying to hack a vehicle, and Kevin talked about having these certificates, the vehicle can basically compare notes. So if it's receiving a certain information and it wants to turn to avoid, let's say, an object, because it's being hacked in, it can compare notes with other vehicles to see if they're registering the same type of information. So you can actually have it as a security feature.
Good.
Yeah, this is a comment from the audience about blockchain and its fundamental approach of challenging and verifying communications in a highly secure way. If there is a way to apply that to the kinds of connectivity things we've been talking about, that would seem to deliver a huge improvement in this defensibility issue. So, any other questions? If not, I would like to thank this fabulous panel on your behalf for spelling out some issues, challenges, solutions, and questions for what's going to be a very big topic. You're going to hear a lot about connectivity for years to come. This is rapidly rising in the industry is a big, big deal. And it will, as you can tell, it won't be going away. So I want to again thank our sponsors, Eaton, GHSP, Hella, and ZF. Thank you for coming. If you're still in the building this afternoon, I invite all of you to our AutoBeat daily reception, which is on the other side of the atrium here starting at 4 o'clock. You're all welcome. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you so much for attending.